Prof Consulting Group is a food and grocery consultancy based in Melbourne, Australia. It operates internationally with a team of specialist consultants in global manufacturing, supply chains and retailing. Well, the company's ethos is very simple. It's to help businesses achieve industry-leading commercial returns by understanding the target consumer intimately and helping them make better informed choices. So the question has to be, how does it do that? Well, let's meet Mark Field. He's the CEO and founder of Prof Consulting Group, and Sarah Blanchard. She is head of ESG. It's good to see both of you. Mark, let's start first with you, because you've got a 30-year track record in retailing, food, etc. How has all of that knowledge paved the way, very briefly, for what you do now?
Yeah, thank you, and great to be here. I think I've been very fortunate. I've got a career of two halves. From my experience in food manufacturing in the UK to my time in Australia from a retail perspective, and the ability to bring both together to understand how do you deliver for consumers in today's market, I think gives us a cutting edge.
Let's focus on ESG, because I think that you set up this unit very, very recently. Yeah. But in terms of the concept itself, is it here to stay, or is it just a fad?
Yeah, we set up the ESG team about 12 months ago because investors were asking us, what does it mean in today's climate? I think it will be here for the long term. I think we've all got an opportunity now to look at how we influence the planet for the future generations, and I think there's growing momentum behind it, and I think we can all make a difference in this area.
Okay, so Sarah, ESG is here to stay, but look, we're living in a time of economic and political turbulence. Is there a risk that brands will perhaps put sustainability on the back burner, because at the moment the job is to make sure you can weather these storms and survive?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Well, yes, there is a risk that brands would put it on the back burner, but those that do will lose out, because the momentum is here now. Consumers want it, investors, civil groups, and regulation is coming. So brands who want to get ahead need to address ESG within their business.
And certainly there is that sense of awareness about the importance of ESG and the empowerment of the consumer.
Yes, indeed. I mean, since the last couple of years with the pandemic, we all know how awareness has increased dramatically. So yeah, that's something in favour of the movement.
But Mark, ESG is a pretty broad term. So what is it that your clients are asking for when you raise this conversation with them?
Yeah, I think just to build on Sarah's point, I think we are going to see a slowdown of pace. But the important thing is being on that journey, because at the moment we're in a position that brands can control the pace at which they deliver the ESG agenda. And I do recognise that some areas will slow down, but I think it's starting that journey that's really important. I think those brands that don't start the journey are the ones that will actually go backwards.
I mean, that's from the business perspective, but what about the consumers themselves? Do they really understand what ESG is all about and how it's influencing their buying habits or their consumption habits?
So I don't think many consumers do understand at the moment, and I think they're looking for NGOs. I think they're looking for organisations to give them guidance and help them learn, the same way that we've helped educate people around what is really healthy foods. So that gives a great opportunity for brands to build customer trust by showing customers what they're doing in that area and helping them understand what's good versus what's potentially just a great headline.
Which is where you come into it, basically. You're part of that education process.
Yeah, we're delighted, because our mission is to help consumers make informed choices, which ultimately helps businesses grow faster.
But Sarah, how should companies start their sustainability plan? Is there a hard and fast rule on this, or does it really depend on what field it is that you operate in?
Yeah, indeed, it really does depend. It depends on the state of the company, the maturity of the company. Some might be absolutely starting from scratch, some might be a little way down the road and they need to adjust. The first thing to do is to engage people internally in the company, get as close to the CEO as possible, because he needs to send the message throughout the company. He's got to be, or she's got to be committed. The other thing is to be close to the CFO, because there will be some initiatives that bring financial benefit as well, and the CEO will be close to the CFO will be close to the CEO as well. And then it's a case of talking with the different people, the different streams within the organisation, finding out what their challenges are, what they think the impacts are. So what can happen is that sustainability representatives will deal in a silo by themselves, but when they engage across the organisation to identify the risks and the opportunities, it's a great way to start bringing sustainability into the organisation, setting targets and making a plan and then starting to involve those who are around the company, the other stakeholders.
That's a really interesting point, because what it seems to be doing is that it's really shaking things up at the C-suite level, connecting people perhaps, or individuals within an organisation that perhaps hadn't existed there before.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about talking about the opportunities and the benefits that can come from implementing ESG activities, and having it as something that is really integrated, integral into the company processes that everybody is doing. So eventually it becomes day-to-day activity. It's just the way to do responsible business.
But is there an advantage perhaps if you actually want to embark on your sustainability plan? By being a very small company, you're new to the game and you've got the enthusiasm, you don't perhaps have some of the legacy of a bigger company, the silos, etc., that were referenced.
Yeah, in some ways it's easier because your decision making is going to be a lot quicker. So, you know, if you're a 5-person team, you can get things done quicker, you can identify your impacts. Where you might struggle is to gain scale. So that's where this collaboration with peers, with industry, with customers to make that impact at a bigger extent is so important.
But what are the typical pitfalls when you're trying to tackle sustainability, regardless of whether you're a small company or whether you're an established player, you're quite big?
Yeah, well, I think it's taking a unidirectional view, so just focusing on one aspect, for example, labour rights or carbon emissions, when really there are many aspects in sustainability. You just need to decide what is most important for your organisation, where you can make the most impact, and what can impact on your company as well. So some organisations might want to say, well, plastic's a really key thing for us, we need to deal with that. Others might say, well, we're sourcing cocoa from far abroad, maybe we need to focus on child labour within cocoa plantations. So it does just depend, and that focus is really important when you're starting out on that plan. Another pitfall can be just dealing, particularly when you're in a larger organisation, with issues by yourself. And that just doesn't get people on board. And when you have your sustainability team as a satellite, you don't get the great effect as if you engage your procurement team, your operations, your marketing, and get them doing things in sustainability with their own feeling.
But what about agricultural and food brands? What do you think that their focus has to be? Because I guess that in some ways there is a bit of an overlap there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right now, you know, we talked about the energy crisis. There are a couple of things. It is the net zero agenda, which is bringing down carbon emissions, and that needs to be done quick. Carbon emissions have to peak in 2025, 3 years away, and they've got to come down by half by 2030. Otherwise, we're going to get catastrophic events by the end of the century, like floods, drought. Most of us won't be around of my age to see this, but my son will be. Yeah, absolutely. So we need to really get working on that, and that involves things like sourcing alternative packaging, like sourcing meat in a good way that hasn't been fed on soya from deforested land, because that is something crucial to soak up the carbon dioxide. And the other aspect is in labour, making sure that, first of all, you're looking at your own people. How are you treating them? Are you paying them a living wage? Have they got the rights that are accorded to them by international regulations like the ILO? And then spreading that through the supply chain. So, you know, it's looking at what you're doing, looking at your emissions, looking at your activities on labour, and then bringing that around your whole suppliers.
Mark, come back into the conversation, because what we heard there was really ESG applied to food and agriculture. But what about the sustainability agenda when you apply it to non-food production? Because obviously that is very important. Get it wrong, you can have a dangerous impact on the environment.
Absolutely, and I think it's seeing the same progress across both areas. It's about embracing technology to deliver solutions that are acceptable to consumers, whether it's food or non-food. We're seeing great activity in the pet food sector now, where they're looking at alternative feed ingredients to deliver the protein requirements for the feed for the growing pet food sector, as an example. We're seeing some great work now around textiles, where people are almost making it fashionable now to reuse or to share clothing. There's an example recently of a retailer matter where the label inside had room for 3 or 4 children's names, so it became popular to hand that coat on to somebody, whereas before we might have just discarded it. So I think what's super exciting is whether it's food or whether it's traditional retailing, everybody's trying to do something now that helps beat this challenge collectively.
And it requires as well an investment in technology to make some of these practical ideas or concepts workable.
Yeah, I think in some areas, but I don't think that to be successful in ESG is necessarily always going to cost you money. You know, we're seeing some clothing retailers now do great initiatives where they will mend and share products, so you can take it back because you no longer want it. They repair it and then they sell it on at a reduced rate to others and still maintain that brand loyalty, which I think is super exciting. And that's not a big investment. It's just them looking in as businesses saying, how can we help when customers want to do the right thing? And I think that's super exciting.
Sure, because the talking point certainly in apparel is fast fashion.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, look, there is a huge responsibility on the shoulders of brands, Mark. But what examples are there that you've come across of brands that are creating good value from embracing sustainability, and also the customers feeling that they are part of this, that it's not just the initiative by the brand itself, but the customers have been brought on board and that everybody's in this journey together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I like to look at it from a what technology perspective as opposed to what particular brand. So if we look at things such as vertical farming, where we're now complementing traditional farming practices and growing fresh crops in a very much smaller footprint, able to maximise the inputs from a water perspective and energy perspective as an example, so that we improve yields and we get less food waste. And then you're seeing that come now into global supply chain. So I think that's very exciting as an example. We're seeing regenerative farming becoming more and more popular now, where people are saying, actually, how do I complement what I've always done, bringing that different lens to what I do at the moment, just as some key examples, yeah.
Just to close things off, let's project into the future. We did at one stage when we talked about the negatives, but I mean, where do you see us being on this journey? Are you both satisfied that we are on track, or do you feel that perhaps we're not doing too badly but we could do better?
I think we're all on a journey, and I think the exciting thing is that we've all started that journey, or most of us have started that journey. But I think it's far too early to say whether we're running at the right pace or whether we need to go faster. I think the important thing for me is always bringing a consumer lens to the technology that we apply, to understand that consumers will accept what we're doing, whether it's cell-cultured meat, whether it's GMO, as examples. You've got to take the customer on the journey, 3D printing of food. Some great technologies, but it's got to be acceptable to the consumer to ultimately deliver success. For me, it's about having a balanced scorecard that says when we get to, it won't be a finishing line because I think this is going to be a way of life for the next generation. But as we get towards that pivotal point where we say, have we been successful, it's not just about one measure that will determine success.
Okay, and Sarah?
Yeah, I see a bright future coming out of this. If I think about yesterday, we were standing by the side of the road in London, and we have a taxi, loud, pumping out diesel, and following it you've got an electric taxi. You know, this is something that you think, wow, this wasn't here 3 years ago. This has happened very quickly. And if we start to think, well, then that cleans up the air. You have less pollution, less noise. That's something already positive. So coming out of Charing Cross Station, there are places where you can recycle your coffee cups. It's right there, again, something that has changed very quickly. I see things like milk, returnable milk bottles, also with plant milk and organic milk. It's giving those consumers those choices, but making it easier for them. So there are all these things that are adding up. So I feel very positive, and I also feel positive that the UK government in particular has decided to put climate science on the national curriculum. This is a great step forward. So I think it's bright.
Good. Optimism. That's what we need. Lots of it. Mark, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.